It was the most virulent, deadly viral outbreak the world had ever seen. When the affliction began to finally relent, 2/3 of the planet's population, 4.2 billion people, were gone. For those left after, the new epidemic was one of moral degradation, survival by any and all means, a pandemic of the inhumane. But small patches of hope sprouted from the fallow ashes of what once was. And for some, our humanity remained the only thing worth fighting for.
Hello there. My name is James Robinson. I am the creator of Homestead. And since we're kind of on a break between season 2 and 3, thought it would be kind of cool to introduce you to the people behind the characters. Today, I have the incomparable Travis Box. Travis, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome. I was going to say, have them look at me first and then guess who I play. Because my guess is they'd get it wrong. Ooh, he's one of the 3 crowns.
Oddly.
Well, in a way.
Why don't we start by having you tell people who you play and a little bit about that character?
Sure. So I play Matt Cohen. He starts the series as Fox's right hand. He over time he falls in love with Kate, and then at the end of season 1, makes some questionable choices when Fox is faced with his own crisis, and ends up having to take over leading Homestead in season 2, and not very well, especially at the beginning. He is a very large athletic man. He military background. He could have probably played professional football. He's
was very strong.
Yeah, he can lift a truck once. And he also he was the gregarious one of the pairing between Fox and Cohen. He was the people person. He was the one that I think he didn't like to see people upset, and his defense mechanism was humor. It was storytelling. It was just trying to find a way to make them smile and forget about their troubles for a while. And I think that at his core, that's kind of who Cohen is. And yeah, he had a rough last season. He definitely had a rough last season.
Speaking of last season, let's take a moment to talk about how Cohen has evolved from season 1 to the end of season 2. I mean, he's gone through quite a journey.
Yeah, he again, I think being the second of the duo for most of his life, and probably internally believing that more than it was true. I think that if you were to ask Fox, he would have said he viewed Cohen as an equal, and I think Cohen would have always said no. Fox was the leader. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that was more a perception thing. But at the beginning of season 2, Cohen still believes that. He still believes that he's not ready for leadership. And when Fox
he's almost
leaves,
fighting it.
Absolutely. I mean, he this is not a role that he believes he is ready to play, especially with the stakes this high. It's not like it was in the military or back in the old days when they were in high school. They are now protecting upwards of 50 people from a harsh world. They're keeping them fed. They're making sure that the basic necessities are met, and they're trying to protect them from other not so good groups out there, while trying to grow Homestead into something that's more than just survival, that is more about rebuilding community better, in the ashes of what had happened. So with all of that, Cohen at the beginning of season 2 has all of it on his shoulders, and he doesn't know what to do, and it spins him, and he, I think, wrongly, chooses to try to mimic how Fox would lead. And I don't think that style works for Cohen.
If people have listened to all of season 2, clearly not.
Yeah, and that's all they. I don't want to put in too many spoilers, because for those of you who haven't gone back and listened to it, he struggles mightily in the first 2/3 of the season, and sadly, the mistakes are tragic. I mean, they cost lives, and he finally has his moment of clarity, and finally starts listening to the people around him, and I think gets his groove. He kind of he decides to pull up his big boy panties and lead the way that he should, not the way that Fox would or anybody else, but how Cohen would. And it works, but it may be too late for Homestead by the time that he finally had figured it out. And I think that was the arc. It was really not a good time for Cohen. It's funny because if you listen to the season, he has this incredibly supportive circle around him that he does nothing but push away. He intentionally almost isolates himself,
Emulating Fox, really.
Yeah, again, it's a Fox tactic, but I think in Cohen's case, the more distance that he could put in, I think the less he felt like he had to be accountable to those actions. It was, and I think that, again, it was to his detriment. And finally, when he was able to snap out of it and listen to the people around him who were giving him really good advice, first he had to go and make all those amends, but then he understood how to do it and how important it was. And I think by the end of season 2, he's actually looking forward to it, which is something that he could not say at the beginning of season 2. But now, yeah, he's risen to the challenge and he's ready to lead Homestead. The question is, the way that season 2 ends, will there be a Homestead to lead?
It's a very important question. I got to know, what do you think Cohen's biggest secret is? Champion bingo player.
No, I want to say that his biggest secret, I think, was everything that we dealt with in episode 2. I think it was his fear of leadership. It was his fear of not having somebody to point to and go, I don't know, ask the boss, right? There's a phrase that I use, I'm a better conciliary than I am a Don, right? And I think that Cohen's biggest secret was that. And it was exposed in season 2. So if you're asking for more of another secret, I will tell you, I guarantee you he is not as suave or was suave with the ladies as his stories lead everybody to believe.
It would be interesting if Fox had been a more open storyteller to expose some of those truths
Yeah. I think that, and that's a part of the dynamic between Cohen and Fox is Cohen likes to hold certain things over Fox's head to keep him shut up.
Yeah.
There's the butt bullet stuff, but growing up, there were things that Cohen knows that it's like mutually assured destruction. It's like, buddy, you can go ahead and out me as not being the ladies' man, but I doubt people want to know about this.
Well, I think even in the very first episode, Cohen is very open about everything, to the point where there's nothing Fox can use as far as blackmail, because I think the quote is, if you spill your own guts, no one can hold it.
Yep.
So let me ask, what's been the biggest challenge playing Cohen?
It has definitely been an emotional roller coaster, starting with the end of season 1 but throughout season 2, and I think it is it's difficult, I think, to honestly portray a lot of the internal struggles that he was going through with himself, because they were masked by lashing out. They were masked by anger and verbal abuse of the people that he actually truly loves and adores, but he was so far gone he couldn't admit that he really was having trouble and needed help. And I think that trying to portray it in a way where the audience felt the struggle but didn't turn on him, because it would have been really easy to make him another Warner, just bitter and angry and mean and awful, and your audience goes, well, forget that guy, I don't care about him anymore. So I think that was the biggest challenge, was to try to find a balance between all of the horrible mistakes that he was making, the front that he was putting on to try to cover it all up, and not be hated by the audience by the time that he had his epiphany. Because if it was done wrong, then by the time he has the epiphany, then nobody cares.
Yeah.
And they actually might get angry that he wasn't taken out of the story. So, but I think that's been, if anything, that has been the biggest challenge. And you as a writer, I mean, you put him in some very emotional situations, either monologues where he's talking about, or two, a fox that he believes is dead or might be. You've had him have really angry conversations with people that he loves and respects. It's just it was a very emotional season, and one, by the way, that I missed the old Cohen, that I missed season 1 Cohen a lot, because I didn't get a chance to play him much until the last couple of episodes, where he finally came out of it. He and became more of that Cohen that we saw in season 1, the funny one, the one with bad jokes and long stories, and we get him back a little bit. And I honestly missed him for the majority of season 2, because he was so lost, it wasn't him anymore.
I feel like when we get him, he's a better Cohen, and I think even Cohen understands, having gone through everything he's gone through, he's better for it. He's still reluctant in embracing that, but he is embracing that and really stepping up. I feel it's going to be interesting to see where he goes in this upcoming season, and you and I, of course, know what's coming. So I sometimes really wish that I could be on the outside as a listener to enjoy this journey and feel, feel for Cohen, because I think you're right. I mean, listening to this past season, there are points that you really want to hate Cohen, but in the back of your mind, you're like, he's still grieving. He just doesn't deal with grief really well.
And I hope that comes through. Again, when you say what was the most challenging thing, it was making sure that it was an honest portrayal of what he was going through,
Mm-hmm.
so that the audience does still remember he's grieving. He does still, they do still remember he doesn't feel like he's up to this challenge, and he's angry, and he's lonely, and he's confused, and all of those things. And I hope that the portrayal, like I said, that the audience gives him a pass, enough of one, that when we get him back, like you said, stronger, at the end of season 2, that they're back on the Cohen train.
Yeah. So I want to know, how do you think you and Cohen are alike?
Well, I can't lift a truck. I didn't play football. I wasn't good with the ladies. I think that
You're both big.
In different areas. Yes, we both are. We're big. I think that, oh man, maybe from the storytelling standpoint, I think that I understand the defense mechanism of storytelling and comedy, and I think he used that. Although he may not have used it as a physical defense mechanism, he probably used it more of as an anxiety. Like if he's in a crowd that he doesn't feel comfortable in because he's the dumb jock, that he used it as humor. Mm-hmm. And I probably did it the opposite. I did it because I was nerdy and was around jocks, and I could make them laugh. So I think storytelling and comedy, the humor that Cohen uses, I think those are similar. I think that he has a very compassionate nature to anyone or anybody that needs help. Mm-hmm. And I like to think that I have that. I will say that as we portray it with Cohen, that doesn't feel like acting anymore. Like when you have kids in the scene and he's getting down and he's talking, kid talk with the kids and getting them to smile and have fun, and or the vignette when he first meets Kate and she tries to take his head off with an axe, and he talks her down, and because he has a kind nature to him, gets Kate to come at least check Homestead out, and she ends up staying. So I hope that part I share with Cohen. I probably share a little bit of the fear of leadership, a little bit, but I also have been in leadership roles. So, as we got to the point where Cohen did stand up, I get that part too. I mean, I think I've had that moment before that he had, where I screwed it all up early and then found my way. So I think we share that. I think that's about it, because I really don't like SpaghettiOs. Yeah. I know he loves SpaghettiOs.
I love that you play so well, but Cohen's one of the characters I've given a lot of little quirks to, and some of which we've talked about, and some of which I've just done. The spaghetti, I honestly, if someone asked, I couldn't tell you where the SpaghettiOs thing came from, but
it's so him, it's a
just,
very
just like the lifting the truck. He loves bragging about lifting a truck, and we found out this season where it came from and why he's so proud of it, and why if he ever does it again, he's done.
Yeah. And I also think that if there's a similarity between us, I think it also has to, I'm going to have to throw your portrayal of Fox in here, because, and it was really apparent to me in the butt bullet vignette, it was our comedic camaraderie. There is a timing that you and I have. There is a self-deprecating humor that you and I tend to write, and I think that episode was a little more James and Travis than it was Fox and Cohen, but it fits Fox and Cohen so well. And I think that it's that type of thing. I mean, you know, Cohen sitting there just screaming at him in the middle of a firefight. And then at the end, when the military is doing the investigation, he completely lies to protect his friend, because he knew it wasn't on purpose. This was an accident. It was just, and he is not going to allow Fox to anything permanent to happen to Fox. He will lord this over him his whole life, but that's his choice, right?
Yeah.
The military doesn't get a say. This is his choice. But so I think that there is a very fun similarity in how you and I portray these two characters, and I think it especially showed up in the butt bullet vignette.
And I would agree. And during season 1, we acted together, but I think you and I only acted across each other a handful of times, and the butt bullet really did show their camaraderie, the fact that they are brothers, and even though they came from different families, by the time that incident happened, they were so
inseparable.
tight. Yeah. And I think it's why when we did the final episode of season 1, it was so powerful. And I knew you and I, when after we did that, we walked away exhausted, because we went pretty hard into that grief zone. And I know for myself, I came home and I couldn't do anything. I was just so drained. But there was a trust when we did that. Like I knew what I was giving to you, you were giving back to me. Right. And I hope in the future we get to do more of that, since we have no idea what happened to Fox.
Yeah.
So let's kind of move forward here. Let me ask you, what was your favorite moment this past season?
It's going to sound absolutely awful, because here we are talking about the character that I play, Matthew Cohen, and everything he's gone through, and the pain and the grief, and he's finding. My favorite moment this past season was playing Damon. Plain and simple, it was my favorite moment of the season, and I think, as an actor, I think I really, and I am so thankful that you let me do it, because when I kind of lobbied for it hardcore when I read it, and you reluctantly were like, yeah, okay, give it a try, because I know you were really interested in doing it. I know there were like 3 other people in the cast,
at least 3 other people
that really wanted to do it, and I was like, no, dude, you gotta let me. And
well, I actually discussed this with someone here, and I'll tell you what made me decide on you is the fact that you actually, because everyone's just, I want to play it. You actually said, this is how I would do it, and this is the voice I will use, and you gave me a sense of that. And I got to tell you, I think that moment, that scene works so well because of what you did, and the fact that we were able to give it to Summer.
Yep.
I know when we recorded it, she talked about it. And I know afterwards, when I heard it all put together, it was nightmare fuel, which is exactly what I wanted. And kudos to both of you, because you brought that creep factor that I wanted. And she went so, like, I could viscerally feel her fear.
Yep.
In that scene. And when it ends, there is a relief, but there's a new tension.
Yep.
And I was proud of it when I wrote it, but I was even more proud of it after you guys voiced it. So thank you, both of you, for doing that.
For me, and it was strictly selfish. And I think it was selfish in the fact that we were still really kind of at a point where Cohen had just, like, at the beginning of the episode where Damon shows up is just when he starts to get his groove back, right? Mm-hmm. So the majority of the season, I have been playing angry, mopey, mess everything up Cohen. And I was really, as an actor, I really needed a breath of fresh air. I needed something. I was so fatigued of that Cohen. And I knew that we were about to change. We were about to start getting back into the Cohen that we like, only strong. Cohen 2.0, I guess. And here's this super dark, totally cerebral villain. And he just gets in your head and starts playing with you like a mouse, like a giant cat with a tiny little mouse. And all I kept thinking of is every interview I've ever seen with Mark Hamill talking about playing the Joker, and how fun it is to play the villain, how much joy he takes out of getting the opportunity to be so bad and so villainous. And I knew you were right. I knew that we had to create something with Damon that pushes Kate to a point that she never would have gone to. And knowing Kate, I mean, acting, side by side with Summer all season as Cohen, I knew it's going to take a lot to push Kate to that moment. And when I saw what you had written, and I kind of went through my head, and yes, there's a little Pinhead Hellraiser in there.
There's a lot of Pinhead in there.
There is.
But there's also, there's also Freddy Krueger. Like, writing that, I drew on some of my favorite villains, the more boisterous ones. There's Hannibal Lecter in there.
Yep.
And it was all about gaslighting. It was all about twisting everything and him trying to get the cerebral upper hand over Kate. It's a game to him. It's a game he's played 1,000 times, and he's won 1,000 times.
What's so funny is you and I never talked about it, but again, in the first read through of those lines, when I decided I really was going to press you on taking this, I already built a backstory in my head. This guy was like the assistant director of a gallery in Northwest, and he worked under somebody who was really abusive to him, like verbally abusive. But he had been in the art realm his whole life, and he'd always had these sick tendencies and fantasies. But when the world crumbled, he had power because he was smart enough to manipulate these dumb souls of the Three Crowns and build an army around him. And then he built his, quote, studio. But this was all just this, in the real world, before it collapsed, he was just this little small man. And then when the world collapsed, he just was pure evil unleashed. And so that easily was my favorite my favorite moment of season 2.
Awesome.
I, there are quite a few scenes that I really liked in season 2, and not with me in them. Yes, the believe it or not, the last scene where we see Doc Ryan is a very touching scene, and you feel something pure about his final moments. And although it also makes you very angry at Cohen. I think that Becca has done just an incredible job, especially with when she does the prayer scene
Yeah.
here in is it the last episode 11?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you haven't,
she gives
heard
us a
that.
vulnerability in Jamie that we have not seen.
Yeah.
Since actually we saw a little bit of it in season 1, where the vignette where she's with Fox, she opens a little bit up, but also in the episode where everyone's kind of ragging on her, episode 10, where she gets to see where Fox grew up. When Becca gives us that vulnerability, especially for a character as strong as Jamie appears to be, it's amazing, but never more so than in that final episode where she's on the verge of giving up.
Yep.
Not just her hope for Fox, but everything. Things have been so bad, and because she's kind of kept herself a part of it, she feels almost responsible. And it comes through in that prayer. I mean, she's begging for God to help them, not for her, but for all of them, and that vulnerability is amazing coming from Jamie.
And then I think my final and my most favorite is the aftermath of what Kate did. So it was not the Damon scene. I think Damon scene sets it up, and you're right. Her reactions are heartbreaking and terrifying. But the very next episode, when she truly does sort of come out of the shock, and there are 2 scenes in particular. The very first one where she comes out of shock and they have to sedate her. And the second one, when Cohen asks, "Tell me what happened," and they're going to sedate her again, and she's like, "Don't you dare sedate me. I'm telling this story." And it was brutal and heartbreaking and so real and visceral. And I think, as strong as she was in the scene in the studio, in Damon's studio, she turned it up to 11 for those scenes once we got back.
Yeah.
And made it a real and very deep issue that this character is not going to get over anytime soon.
Yeah, it's again looking into, and again, we already know, but I think for listeners moving into this next season, it's going to be heart-wrenching to follow Kate's journey, and see what happens to her. Let me ask you, if I could switch everything and you could play any other character, who would you like to play?
Warner.
To be the villain?
And that's exactly why. To be the snake, the manipulative, he gets the greatest lines, and he gets to do the greatest stuff, and he is just so reprehensible. But I think that if there were any, regular or semi-regular character that I would love to try, Warner would definitely be there. And then, um, maybe one of the crew in Sandy. And I don't even know which one, but one of them, somebody, more down home, more, salt of the earth, protecting what they have, do things a little different than the city boys.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. But really, I mean, those are hard choices because I'm so enmeshed right now with Cohen that it is hard to look at any other character and go, you want to be them? I couldn't, I wouldn't know how.
Yeah.
I know how to do Cohen, but I wouldn't know how to do that. So yeah, but I think it would be fun to do Warner, but again, it's that villains are fun
Yeah.
capacity. So
Okay, so Hollywood comes calling. They buy up Homestead, but you get to cast Cohen. Who do you cast as Cohen?
Hemsworth.
Which one?
Is Chris the one that played Thor?
Yeah,
Him.
good choice.
I so he has to be big. I mean, he definitely has to have the size of a possible football player, right? He has to be fit enough and big enough to believe that he was active duty military when this all went down, and he's still young enough to have that look.
Mm.
He has to look like a ladies' man and have a certain charm about him to make you believe that he was a ladies' man. But he has to have a vulnerability in him that makes you believe he's a second in command and would really struggle with leadership on his own. And I think,
And he's got to be
I
funny.
yeah, and so I mean, if you look at when he was in the remake of Red Dawn,
Yeah.
that's kind of the guy, that I kind of, I at least physically in my mind, that's what I think of when I think of Cohen. And I think he's got the comedic timing and he's got the charm, but he's also got the ability to deal with, grief and regret and anger and all of the stuff that Cohen had to go through in season 2. So that's who I would go with.
Good choice. Good choice. Okay, so if you were to write an episode of Homestead,
Mm-hmm.
what would the story be?
You know what? I would really love to explore Alan and the Ross Island crew for an episode. I would really like to understand their dynamic because even though they joined Homestead, even by the end of season 2, they still kind of view themselves their own voting bloc, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they haven't fully assimilated. They still think of themselves as the Ross Island group. And we know Alan. I mean, Alan obviously has been a very pivotal character. He's on the council. Who is it?
Emily?
What's her name? Emily.
Mm-hmm.
I think we met Emily once, right? In
She's
the
been
Ross
on a
Island.
couple.
Okay. I would love to explore that group and that dynamic a little more. We've explored, the Sandy group some. There are some plans to explore a few of the other groups in further episodes. But here is an internal group that I think that I really want to know the backstory. I mean, we meet them at a moment that they're really in trouble. We help them off that island, and we really don't go into their backstory much after that. I think that there are stories there that are ripe for some good Homestead drama.
Great, get on that. I expect a first draft. One last question, and then we'll let you go. What do you see in Cohen's future? Where do you see him going? No spoilers.
No, I'm not going to spoil. I see new and unique challenges. I don't see him backsliding as a character. I do not see him devolving back into self-doubt. I think he has taken on this role of leadership, and now whatever hijinks or shenanigans it gets him into, he still is going to do it wearing that badge of leadership, and it may get him into trouble. But I do see him standing up for himself, advocating for himself, not backing down, and I think Cohen is going to do right by those he loves until it kills him. And we will see if that is this season or next season or the season after. But I do believe that this, I mean, I have always felt he was this guy, but even during the struggles that he had in season 2, this is a guy that will jump in front of a bullet for you. That he really would, he has a self-sacrificing nature about him that I think is only being amplified now that he is a leader. And it will be interesting moving forward, again, to see if that paints a target on him, or to see if he is the guy that jumps on the proverbial grenade for the group. But that's what I see in his future. And I see his relationship with Kate developing. I see his friendships strengthening with Wheeler and Abby and Alan, Nicole, and Jamie. Now that they've buried the hatchet and they're back on more of a brother-sister footing. So I think that he is going to repair the damage that he's done. He's gonna wear this mantle of leadership, and he's going to continue to do what's right for Homestead at his own peril. And I will leave it at that.
Sounds good. Well, Travis, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. We really appreciate it. I can't wait to see what season 3 brings for Cohen, and honestly, just hanging out in the studio with you. We always have such a fun time.
Homestead is a Not Another Podcast production.